Welcome to Lair of the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Midweek Maiden. This is where we get together on Wednesdays to discuss all things Iron Maiden with you. And for today's episode, I have a very special guest. Joining me is Luis Mariano Rodriguez Rojas. And
There
he
you
is a diehard. I had to put my glasses on for that to make sure I got that one right. He is a diehard Iron Maiden fan. He has an Iron Maiden book that is about to come out that we're going to talk about that. And he's also going to be giving us some little known facts, trivia, if you will, about early Iron Maiden that maybe some of you fans out there may not know, maybe even some of you hardcore fans out there may not know. Now, Luis and I, we tried to make a video a long time ago in my channel, very early on in my channel, and the internet was just not working in our favor. We couldn't make it work out here, and I'm glad to have him back here at the Lair. So, Luis, thanks for joining me here again at the Lair.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, John. It's a real pleasure to be able to do this finally.
Yeah, Midweek Maiden. Thanks for joining us here. Okay, tell us about this book because this sounds super, super cool. Tell us about, because last time I spoke to you, I think it was only available in digital. But now you have a hard copy coming. So tell us about the book. Tell us where we can get it. Of course, I'll link in the description down below information on Luis's book and where you can get it. But go ahead.
Well, basically, the whole idea from the book started like 30 years ago when I was just a young, teenager, just getting into Maiden. It was the early 90s. I originally wanted to do a website. But since I had no idea, and you have to remember that in the early 90s, it was not like just you go on log and how to create a website. No, it was nothing like that. So I started collecting lots of information from Maiden. I started buying like magazines and books and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And collecting. And I got married like 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago. And my wife said, hey, why don't you do something with all this information? So I started writing a book. And at the time, I wasn't really sure if people will be interested in it. So I first came out with an ebook that's like, it currently has like 1,200 pages long, because it's a detailed description of each song that Maiden has released. It has some interesting trivia. It has a lot of information. So people were really interested in that. I sold like about 100 copies or something like that. I remember the first like 20, 30 copies sold out in just 2 days. So I said, I have something here. So I wrote a second book, which is somewhat related to the one that's coming soon, that tells what I like to say is like the true story about Iron Maiden. That ebook also sold quite well, but I left something out of it, and was the people I interview for the book. These are people that worked with Steve Harris and the band since 1974, when he was just like an influence in Gypsy's Kiss, his first band. I spoke with some people that worked with him in Smiler, and it goes all the way from 1973 to 1983, because and this sounds like crazy. Originally, I wanted to cover like the period from 1973 to the early 90s, right to the 1990. But the manuscript of the book is 432 pages. And while I was editing and putting images and rarely seen pictures and unseen pictures till now, for the hard book that's coming out, it was already 333 pages. So I said, no, I have to cut the story short. So I just covered for now, I just covered the story from 1973 to 1983, which is right about to start when the band is going to record Power Slave. So, well, that's basically the idea behind this book that's coming out. Is like, once again, I said the true story of the band, since it's told by people who were actually there,
Yeah.
actually when the events happened. Uh, some people that I have interviewed, I can tell you, of course, that because it's already out there. I talked to Paul Sears. Of course, I talked to Dave Smith. That was the first person that it was the guitarist with whom Steve Harris started his first band, Influence, that eventually got to Gypsy's Kiss. I talked to Paul Sears, who worked with Steve in Gypsy's Kiss and for a short period in Smiler. I talked to Dennis Wilcock, who is not someone easy to get, and he doesn't get too much love from Maiden fans because he decided, well, his lawyer basically decided to take Maiden to court, and that didn't end up well for them. But the time when I spoke with him was right before that whole thing with the lawsuit started. So he was very open to talk about certain things. Of course, he, as always, people who tell their stories, they always try to bend it for their favor.
Yeah.
But thank God I have, since I've been writing and researching for this book so long, I was able to, like compare stories and what's true, what's not. And we're going to talk about that in a while because most people, I think, don't realize what really happened between Dave Murray and Dennis, because Dennis is the famous person that basically threw out Dave from Maiden. But the story behind it is quite interesting, and that's one of the trivias I'm going to tell you. I spoke with a famous reporter who was a girlfriend of Dave Murray, who actually was a senior editor of Metal Hammer magazine. We're talking about Piva Lang. I spoke with Andy Curran. I don't know who it is. He was the bassist and vocalist of a band called Connie Hatch, who supported he supported Maiden and some of the North American leg of the World Peace Tour. I've spoken to a lot of people. I've spoken to people who worked with band while they were writing and rehearsing in the island of Jersey in 1983. Jesus, it's a long list. It's a long list of person I have interviewed for this book.
That's fascinating. That sounds really interesting because you really sort of, you're able, it sounds like you talked to a lot of people who were around the band in those really early days, which, we hear, they tell the story of those early days, but it's, you don't always get all the details, especially the really early stuff. So tell us, all right, so you obviously went into this before you started working on the book, doing all these interviews. You were a hardcore Iron Maiden fan. You were probably very knowledgeable going into this. So what were some things that surprised you, or we're here talking about sort of trivia or things people may not know about the early days of Iron Maiden or Steve Harris's early bands? What were some things that surprised you or that you had no idea about till you started interviewing these people?
Well, the first thing I will say is Steve didn't really feel confident about his bass playing, and he really didn't feel like that confidence about, let's say, go to the next stage with Maiden until basically he had a rift with Dennis Wilcock. We're talking about late 1978. He was always kind of, I mean, he kind of knew the direction he wanted to take Maiden, but he wasn't entirely sure. So that's why when Dennis Wilcott entered the band, it was actually Dennis who was the force behind Maiden. I mean, he took care about the bookings of the gigs. He took care about the promoting of the band, and it wasn't until late 1978 when Dennis wanted to go with a more uh, kind of soft rock sound that Steve really put some thought into it and said, "No, I want Maiden to be something harder. I want more edgier. eh, that the hard rock." It was at that moment when Maiden really started shaping to the Maiden we kind of knew from the 80s and 90s, because of course Maiden now is a total different thing than when it was started. So that really impressed me. I mean, a funny story that Dave Smith told me was that Steve didn't know how to tune his bass
Mhm.
until until late. I think it was 77.
Wow.
People had to do it for him, and he was so nervous. And he was that's another funny story. He was so nervous that he always used to go to the loo right before the gig started. Always, always. And here's another funny story that Paul Sears told me. I guess every Maiden fan knows the story about the first gig that uh, Harris actually played in front of an audience was in St. Poplar's church auditorium, and it was like this contest where he was in, and they were about to start, and Paul Sears, who had played many gigs before in Influence, told him, "You know what? Don't peek outside the curtains before we go in." Of course, Steve didn't take didn't take his advice. Took a peek behind the curtain, and he ran straight to the loo. You know for what? And well, that's one of the funny stories I have in the book.
Yeah, it's funny because this image we have of Steve is this very focused, very confident, knows what he wants, and you sort of just assume that he was like that from the very beginning. But
Yeah.
like most people, like most of us, we all start somewhere. Everybody's a beginner
Mm-hmm.
at one time. We all have our little insecurities and things like that. And yeah, so it is kind of funny to hear that about Steve. Him being
Yeah.
not confident about the whole thing. And it seems now the logical, you sit back and look, well, obviously Iron Maiden was going to make it, but back then,
Yeah.
I mean, who
Mm-hmm.
knows? I forget who it is in the early years DVD that they put out. I can't remember who it is. It was somebody who was in the band at one point, and they said, "Well, I wanted to do more cover songs, so we could play better places and make money." And Steve wanted to do originals, and he sort of pauses and he goes, "Well, you can see who won that argument."
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
but at the time
Mm-hmm.
when you're in the middle of something, I mean, you don't really know. I had someone on the channel here who saw Iron Maiden, like 79, 78, 79, and 80, and I mean he recognized that they were really really good, but they were like the best of all the new wave of British heavy metal bands that were around at that time. But he didn't think they were going to be conquer the world the
Of
way
course.
that they've gone on to conquer the world. So how did you track down some of these people, like these people that were in his early bands and stuff like that? That must have been a real adventure.
Yeah, yes, it was. Yes, it was. I mean, Facebook actually helps a lot, but once you get like in this whole thing, and you gain the trust of certain people, they're willing to put your name out there. You know,
Okay.
Paul Sears is actually a very friendly guy, and he knew I was writing the book, and I wrote him. He wasn't this Iron Maiden group I'm into, and I wrote to him and I said, "Hey, I'm writing this book about Iron Maiden. I'm trying to be respectful about the stories, the band. I don't want like to dig the dirt. That's not my intention. Are you up to it?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So once I spoke with Paul Sears, I had a kind of open window with Dave Smith,
Mm,
because I told him, no, I spoke with Paul, and this is the idea behind it. And I actually also spoke with another guy that put another book out, and he put the word out for me also. And from there, it all started. It's I forgot. In the book, there's also a very, very interesting story from the guys, from the dancers in the Number of the Beast video.
okay.
I
I don't
spoke
know
with
this
the,
story.
okay, I spoke with them. I spoke with them. So, and the story is actually very, very funny. I don't want to spoil it for people who's going to buy the book, but I'm going to tell you how I tracked down those guys. uh, while I was doing research for the book, I also I didn't just wanted to talk to people. I actually wanted to have like newspapers clippings from the old days, local papers, like this very, very, very digging deep in the story of the band. And I found out a local paper that around 82, when the video was filmed, talked with these guys. They were actually ballroom dancers. And I think to this date is, well, I know this because the guy told me, the male dancer told me. There was only one article that mentioned them by their names. So that was a start. And I said, okay, let's see if I can track him down in the internet. And the guy and his wife, that's the girl that dances in the video, has they have a dance academy in the UK, and they have an email address. I wrote them like 3 times, no response. I said, well, that's it. And then, like, after I have given up, a month later, this guy wrote me, "Hey, he was the nephew of the guy who danced in the video. And hi, I'm the nephew. I'm the one in the front of the dance academy. I will put your name forward to my uncle." He did that, and the uncle wrote, and he was delighted to tell his story. I mean, I made his day, and when people read it, they're gonna laugh. And he's an incredible storyteller. I mean,
Wow.
to this day, I must say he's my friend. We usually go back and forth with the emails. He's a lovely guy, and well, his story is just so funny.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's some digging deep there. Getting the
Yeah.
dancers from the Iron Maiden from the Number of the Beast video. Wow. That sounds really interesting. Now, what would you say? I want to make a second video with you. Here's a little. This came to me. We're going to make a second video, and I
All
want
right.
you to talk about rare audio, rare recordings from, you know, 73 to 7, let's say before the first album came out. We're going to make that a
Mm-hmm.
whole separate video
All
because
right.
that is something that I'm interested in, and I think it deserves its own video. But what would you say is the point? Steve is doing Gypsy's Kiss, these early things. When is the point when it flips to becoming Iron Maiden? I mean, is it before he officially calls the band Iron Maiden? Like, where's the point where he moves from a guy in somebody else's band to a guy, trying to do this thing that will become Iron Maiden? Do you think there's a moment or a time frame when this sort of happens for Steve, or was he like this from the beginning? Right from the beginning, was he like, I'm going to start my own band, I'm going to write my own music, or where was that point for Steve, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question because it's interesting what actually happened. I mean, he's 17. He gets along with Dave Smith and forms Influence and say, I want to play like original material. That's his mind, but he knows that he doesn't write too many songs. I mean, Dave Smith wrote the first songs in Influence and Gypsy's Kiss. And at that point, right when Gypsy's Kiss folded, he sort of wanted to have his own band, but he felt that he needed more experience. So he says that's when he goes to Smiler. He gets into Smiler. Smiler is not, it doesn't play hard rock, which was what Steve wanted to play. And he has spoken about this. He wanted to gain experience and learn how the bands function and the whole promoting thing. But eventually he starts writing, that story is true. He starts writing his material, and eventually he says, the guys in Smiler are not interested. And Tony Klee, who was the bassist and one of the guitarist of Smiler, explains this in an interview. And he says, I mean, it wasn't our type of music, because, and he actually says this in an interview. He says, people give me flack because I didn't want to play Steve Harris's songs. But I mean, from the start, we were interested in that kind of music. We were a boogie band, as Doug Sampson described it. So what happens then? And this is the point. This is like it's a straight answer to your question. Steve leaves Smiler, then Dennis Wilcock leaves Smiler, and Doug Sampson leaves Smiler. And Steve wants to start his own band, but he doesn't know any musicians. So, and this is probably the second trivia for Maiden fans who probably don't know this. Dennis Wilcock starts a band. He's been rehearsing with a guy who I actually also, I wouldn't say interviewed, but I have a small chat with him. And he was he's the guitar player. I don't remember his name at the moment. But he was playing with Dennis Wilcock, and Dennis Wilcock invites Steve to join them. So he goes to Smiler to this band project that Dennis Wilcock has with his guitarist. And he brings another guitarist who he knew, that's called, and you're gonna read this anywhere else, Cherry Rampage. I don't know if that's his real last name, but that was like he was called, and he invites. So they start like this band project. This is quite important to know it, because it's not like Steve played in another band after Smiler. He didn't. So this project band lasted about like 3 weeks. They rehearsed almost every day in a place that's used to be called Scarf Studios. And he doesn't like the direction that the band's going to. And there was a difference between this guitarist that Dennis Wilcock was playing with and Steve Harris. And that's the point where Steve Harris says, I have to do my own thing. I will have to put up my own band. That's the point.
Yeah, that's the
so
truth.
that's
Interesting.
yeah, that's like about middle, like middle 1975, something like that.
Interesting. All right, let's leave it with one more thing here. I'm going to. All right, I'll ask you, because how about when Paul Di'Anno leaves and Bruce comes in? Is there any interesting thing in that period that most Maiden fans may not be aware of? Like, was there anybody else in the running for Bruce's spot? Was there, that whole period there of Paul leaving, Bruce coming in? Is there any sort of things you think might surprise your average Iron Maiden fan?
Yeah.
Mm,
And people think like this is impossible, but Steve wasn't really sure at first that Bruce was coming into the band. I mean, it wasn't his first choice, like many people think. His first choice was actually this guy. His name escapes me now. He's a friend of Adrian. He's what's the name of the guy? Well, it will come to me. But his first option wasn't Bruce.
mm.
It wasn't. It wasn't. And they actually auditioned this guy. I know he sang at least 3 songs. I know he sang Remember Tomorrow. He sang Iron Maiden, and he sang Rothschild. And according to this own the account of this person, because he gave an interview, I just don't remember
Was
his
he in a
name.
band or anything? Was he in a popular
Yeah,
band or a band that had
uh,
recorded anything at that point?
yeah, he was the guy that AC/DC wanted before Brian Johnson got the gig.
Hmm. All right. Well, if you don't remember it here at this video, I will put his name in
All right,
underneath in case it
please do.
doesn't come to us. I'll put it in underneath here for everybody, so you know that name when we figure it out later.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what
Interesting.
happened. He was auditioned, and according to his own account, he didn't like how he sounded. Like, and he messed up the lyrics for Iron Maiden. So when that happened, then it was when Steve actually spoke with Rod and said, "Ask Bruce." Of course, and this is another interesting fact. Before Steve told Rod to go and ask Bruce if he wanted to audition for Maiden, he kind of put the word out. You know, he talked to Neil Kay, because of course we have to remember Neil Kay was very close to many bands, including Samson. Although Paul Samson and Neil Kay they weren't friends at all. Neil Kay always blamed Paul Samson always blamed Neil Kay for Samson not making it big.
Mm.
And that's another kind of interesting story. But Neil Kay says, I couldn't. Oh, I actually interviewed Neil Kay also for the book. He sometimes says that he spoke with Bruce and told him, "Hey, listen, Maiden is going to ask you to join, so you better be on the lookout. And I suggest you say yes, because Samson is going nowhere and Maiden is going to places." So when Bruce was asked about audition for Maiden, he already knew they were going to ask him.
Mm.
So that kind of put in perspective why the famous answer Bruce gave to Rod, like, I'm going to get the job, and when I get it, blah, 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 blah. He kind of, yes, he was cocky, but he kind of knew that Maiden
Yeah.
wanted him and kind of needed him. That
Yeah.
was clear. That was clear. So, well, that's the thing.
Fascinating. All right, well, there you go. Some quick, very fascinating, very interesting early Iron Maiden trivia for everybody out there. Luis's book sounds absolutely fantastic. What's the title of the book, Luis?
I think it's going to be called Eddie Made Me Do It, and I'm going to explain the title later. Eddie Made Me Do It: The Rise of the Beast, 1973 to 1993.
That's awesome. All right, well, I will be leaving links in the description for everybody so you can get more information on this book when it comes out. From what we've heard so far, this is going to be really, really interesting. And I know I'm going to have Luis back here at the Lair for another midweek meeting, because I've got some other things that I want to ask him. So, Luis, thank you for joining me here at the Lair for midweek
It's been a
meeting.
pleasure.
And for
It's
everybody out there, till we see you again, so you stay heavy, stay metal.
ah